You are now tuned in to the Dads Who Lift podcast with your host, Joel Staley.
That was a crazy podcast, and I learned a ton. My guest today, JK Emezi, is a certified sex and porn addiction coach. He's not some religious nut that's telling you not to masturbate because God's looking down on you and judging you and you're going to go to hell. But more so, this all stemmed from his own addictions when an incident that happened to him when he was 8 years old led him down this dark path of being addicted to porn and having to get freakier and freakier porn, which led him into some weird sex stuff. He gets into all this stuff in the podcast. It's a must listen to. He also helps you identify if porn is maybe taking a negative toll in your life, if it's affecting your relationships, when to have the conversation with our kids about porn, and the list goes on and on. Super fascinating stuff. I'm going to have some fitness people on this podcast soon, you guys. I know it's Dads Who Lift, but I'm just finding these awesome guests like JK, and I want to pick their brains, and this is definitely a podcast you're not going to want to miss. So without any further ado, let's get into the podcast. All right, so we had some technical difficulties, but I'm sitting here with JK, and I'm super excited. If you don't know about JK yet, do you mind telling your story? I'm pretty sure you can tell it better than me.
Well, I'm JK Emezi, and I'm a certified sex and porn addiction recovery coach. I'm basically just a guy who watched a lot of porn for a long time and basically dedicated a good portion of my life to ending that behavior, way before it became even a conversation in polite society. And now this is what I do professionally. I help men end their out of control sexual behaviors. I help them end their compulsive behaviors with sex, with pornography, and a few other things that we may not need to get into on this podcast.
Oh, we'll get into them.
Cool.
So this isn't like some religious type thing, like you shouldn't masturbate because God's watching. It's more like you used to have an addiction. It was wearing on your life. And then how'd you go about fixing that addiction for yourself?
Well, it's definitely not a religious thing. You know, Joel, a lot of times guys will hear about something like this and they'll say, well, if this guy's against pornography, then he's probably against sex, or he's really a conservative Christian and he thinks it's sin. For me, it's very practical. Any man who has struggled with pornography, and struggle doesn't mean you have an addiction. It just means it's a behavior that you know you engage in a little bit more than you should. Any man who has gotten to the point where it's interfering with his life, it's interfering with his intimacy with his wife, with his partner, it's taking away from important things he could be doing in his career or in his lifestyle, needs to dial it back a little bit. And one of the things that most guys realize is that once you start trying to control your behavior with pornography, you realize it's not as easy as you thought it would be. And I know, Joel, you have your own story. You know, so my story is pretty simple. I got exposed to pornography when I was 8 years old, and there was someone who was taking care of us, nanny, so to speak, when we were growing up. And she just had this magazine that it was a comic book, you know, and I was a kid. I loved comics, and I was like, I haven't read this one. And she was like, it's not for you, it's for adults. But anyway, I was determined to find out what it was, so I got a hold of the comic, and it turned out to be porn. Until today, I will never forget the scene. Long story short, without getting explicit, it was a comic book strip, a book about a guy who brings his fiance back to see his dad. And his dad is turned on by how sexy his fiance is, sends his son off on some, bullshit errand, and ends up just having this crazy sex with the fiance. And I'm 8 years old. I know this is naughty. I know I shouldn't be looking at it. But Joel, there was this rush that I experienced when I saw that. I don't think I was old enough to have a hard-on or anything like that. But there was just rush, like, this is naughty. This is crazy. And that was my first chemical rush, my first neurochemical rush ever. And I just kept going back to it. Fast forward a few years later, I'm 13, 14 years old, and I learn how to masturbate. And then it all clicks for me. I'm like, so that rush I get from looking at naked people, this is the purpose. I'm supposed to masturbate to it. And I just became a compulsive masturbator. I watched a lot of pornography. Unfortunately, I started using it to medicate a lot of my pain. Rejection from women in high school. I was a super skinny guy. Took a lot of work for me to put on muscle. I didn't figure that out till later on in life, so I was very insecure. And porn was, and it is for many guys, it was my first girlfriend. It was my first relationship. It was who I ran to when I experienced anxiety or rejection or fear or stress or any strong emotion. And when I turned 21 and I was in college, it started spiraling out of control. I would go to bars, try to pick up girls. On nights where I struck out, come back and watch porn. I would go on dates that didn't work out quite the way I thought they would, come back and watch porn. And my grades started taking a hit. My finances started taking a hit. I started losing all my part-time jobs. And long story short, I reached a point in my life where I started crossing some boundaries. I started going from porn addiction to trying to act out some of those things in real life. And I just realized it was not the way I was raised. I was actually raised by a conservative Catholic family. My parents were relatively well off, both medical doctors. I was like, I wasn't raised like this, to live this way. So I started seeking help. And back then, there was nothing. There was no help. Like when I sat with a therapist and told her that I had a porn addiction, she laughed. She's like, it's just something from your Catholic upbringing. It's just guilt. But it wasn't, because I wasn't really guilty watching pornography. I was only trying to stop because it was really interfering with my life. And then I found myself some mentors. I did go to 12-step programs. I spoke to therapists. I read books. I worked with mentors. I did some of the craziest things to try and stay off it. It took me about, I'd say, a good 7 to 8 years of trying to quit, to really put together everything that I needed. And we can get into that a little bit later, but that's about how long it took for me to control my behavior with pornography. And so right now, for those who are curious, I don't masturbate and I don't watch porn. I have an active sexual life, but I do neither.
Wow. So at 8 years old, you would think, I don't have a ton of memories before 8 years old. So that has to be one of your like first memories ever. Or is it not? Maybe I just have a shitty memory. I don't know.
Well, here's something interesting, Joel. A lot of men who have or had a problem with pornography find it very difficult to go back into their past and identify feelings. The reason why is at one point in time, most men who are using pornography or sex to medicate some emotion, their emotions got frozen in time. And what that means is, let's say a guy had his girlfriend when he was 16 years old cheat on him, and that really hurt him bad. So he started watching a ton of porn. It's not unusual to find that he does not have many memories before the age of 16 years old, because there was this traumatic event that happened and everything was frozen at that point. I would say I remember it at 8 years old because of that chemical rush, just because of how intense it was, that's why it stayed with me.
Have you always had an addictive personality when it comes to different type things, or was sex and masturbation like it?
I used to think I had an addictive personality, but I really think that's a myth. I think that when somebody has a compulsive behavior with one thing in their life, they have a tendency to be impulsive with many other things. Thus, guys who struggle with pornography tend to be impulsive with their internet use or their social media use. Some of them tend to have compulsive behaviors with things like alcohol. Really depends on their lifestyle. So I don't believe there's something like an addictive personality. I'm actually, the funny thing was, while I was struggling in the latter years to end my behavior with pornography, I actually was building a successful door-to-door sales business. And I was incredibly disciplined during that point while I was struggling with that. So that was the only issue I had. Everything else in my life was in order, but I did not experience success because when you're addicted to porn, it kind of clouds your judgment. You don't have much clarity with what you're doing.
So when you coach guys or when you're just making general recommendations, do you want guys to limit their porn use and just dial it back, or is it something guys should cut out cold turkey?
It depends. It's a case by case basis. I want to make it clear, I'm not anti-pornography. I don't think you can beat the porn industry. I think it's really a personal choice. Also, just to preface it, I have no moral judgment. If a guy wants to watch porn, it's fine. The men that I work with are men who reach out to me and they're like, JK, it's a little too much. I need some support. There are some men who I recommend that they stay off porn for about 90 days, porn and masturbation. And the reason why, Joel, is because what that does is that it gives them an opportunity to actually experience what life is like without pornography. When they experience how different their life is, that gives them the momentum to continue doing that. There are some men who I recommend that they completely quit porn and masturbation. And these are some men who are, let's say there's a guy who goes to work and he acts out at work. He gets super stressed out at work, goes into the bathroom, rubs one off. He's the guy who might find his behavior escalating. Maybe he's watching some pornography that could even be potentially illegal. And, he just, to reboot and to rewire his brain, which is basically returning your neural pathways to what they used to be, you do need to stay off porn for a certain amount of time. It takes about 1.5 years to 2 years for your brain to fully rewire. It takes about 90 days to build up the habit and the systems to do so. That makes sense. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, exactly. It actually leads into another one I had. What effects does porn have on the brain if you're watching it constantly, or it's a big habit of yours?
Gosh, there are a bunch of them. I would say one of the biggest one is the impact it has on your prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex of your brain is responsible for what is known as executive function. So executive function is stuff like prioritizing. So you wake up in the morning and you're like, these are all the different things I'm going to do. And then tomorrow I'm going to follow up on this. And I'm going to do all these different things. Now, when you struggle with pornography and you watch a lot of porn and your brain rewires, you lose the neural connections that you have in your prefrontal cortex. And this is common in drug addicts. It's common in some alcohol addicts, but you see it in like heroin addicts a lot. And it is mirrored in porn addicts and sex addicts. So what that does, the biggest impact it has on your brain is that you notice that you're not able to prioritize tasks. You experience a lot of fatigue, mainly because you are overusing a lot of your hormones and neurotransmitters. So just to without getting too deep, when you view pornography, there are several hormones and neurotransmitters that are involved. So we have testosterone is involved, which is, let's say you look at somebody, you see something that triggers you, and there's a lot of testosterone is released, which impacts your sex drive. Dopamine is released. Norepinephrine, which is a cousin of adrenaline, is also released from your adrenal glands. You also have endogenous opiates. Our body has these tiny amounts of opiates that are released, usually when we orgasm. When you binge watch pornography and you keep releasing this, then what happens is that you throw off the balance of your hormonal system in your body, which then leaves you feeling tired. Sometimes when you masturbate a lot, you release a lot of prolactin, which then makes you more fatigued. So then you have guys who have trouble sleeping, and they're like, dude, I can't sleep unless I rub one off, unless I masturbate. You have guys who can't focus. They masturbate the next day. They say, JK, I just feel like I've got brain fog the next day. I've lost my motivation. I run a business. I'm supposed to be grinding, killing it, being excited about my goals and serving people. But dude, I can't do that when I've had like a couple of days of just binging on pornography. So the impacts are everywhere from impacting your energy levels to impacting your ability to focus.
So, is there a cutoff? Say somebody wants to dial back the porn or even quit porn altogether.
Mm-hmm.
But so instead, they like break out the old school Victoria's Secret catalogs, like when you were a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is that considered the same thing, or where's the gray area? Is there one?
You know, I'll be honest with you. I don't know. And here's the reason why. I don't know because I don't use that as a part of my system. A lot of guys, when you watch high-speed internet pornography, there's nothing vanilla about it. You know, it is violent, it is freely and widely available. If you're on a tube site, you're gonna have multiple tabs opening. You're gonna be looking for, you can find anything you want, any genre, anything to suit your tastes. It is almost impossible to go from that to like jerking off to a Sports Illustrated cover model, you know, or masturbating to a woman on Instagram, you know, like, oh, you know, some hot fitness model. Now, during your recovery, you will become a lot more sensitive, obviously, if you've stayed off porn for 90 days. So yeah, scrolling through Instagram, seeing some hot chick squatting, yeah, that might make you want to masturbate, and you may masturbate to it. But what happens with some of the guys I help is literally a few hours later or 2 days later, get back to the hardcore stuff. So the reason why I say I don't know is because I literally have not met a man who was like, yeah, JK, I just went back to the Sears catalog. I went back to Playboy and life's been good. I dialed it back. Dialing back just doesn't exist because what we have now, it's too extreme.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So as far as like, I have a super young daughter, so I won't have to worry about this for a while. But for some of our listeners who are dads, or even if some moms listen that have a little bit older kids, at what age would you recommend talking to our kids about porn, or is there a certain way to go about it? What's your take on it?
I would say, and I'm not a father, but a lot of my clients are fathers. And what I tell them is, I use myself as an example, and I tell them that I was 8 years old. Right now, I'm 35 years old. You know, so back then, I still came across pornography, and it still had a profound impact on my life. I do believe that it's important to talk to your kids about it as soon as they have the ability to handle technology on their own. Not as soon as you give them technology. As soon as they have the ability to get on a tablet and play a game and manipulate it, you need to just talk to them about it, whether it is explaining to them that, you know, like if they see something like naked bodies or they see certain body parts, that they should just let you know. You know, it's also important to understand that it's not a matter of if your child is going to come across pornography, it's a matter of when. The average age now for exposure to pornography is said to be between 8 and 11 years old. However, there are kids who have been exposed to pornography as early as 5 years old and 6 years old. In fact, I was visiting with an acquaintance and in Texas a couple of weeks ago, and her kids were playing, I think it was Minecraft, and they both had tablets. And you know, I just kind of brought it up. I was just like, so, like, I was like, it's cool. I was like, but they have their own tablets. I was like, do you take it away at certain times? She was like, yeah, but most times they just do what they want with it. I was like, so do they have access to the internet? And she was like, yeah, they watch these Minecraft videos and Fortnite videos on YouTube all the time. And I was like, do you think it's possible that they've come across pornography? And she was like, nah, I don't think so. And I was like, what if I told you that if I grabbed one of their tablets, I could find porn that they've visited in their history? I was like, have you ever looked at their browsing history? She's like, why would I look at my browsing history of my kids? You know, they're babies. Well, there wasn't pornography on there, but these kids were participating in the comments of YouTube videos of these games that they watched. where there were kids who were making jokes, and the only way you could make those, I'm not going to get into it here, but the only way you could make those jokes was that you had to have been watching porn. You must have had, they would make references of different things they were trying to simulate in the game. And I was like, you would only know about that if you viewed pornography. And I was like, kids are very curious. If they feel like they don't know what's going on, they're going to try and find out. So the earlier you speak to them, and it's sad that, we have to worry that our kids will be exposed to this. The best thing we can do as adults is rein it in ourselves, and accept the fact that they will see it. We just want to prepare them to deal with it in a mature way.
And for the listeners, JK doesn't have any kids because he ran out of sperm during his addiction.
Yep, I ran out. My balls are empty. So that's the warning to you guys. If you want to have kids, don't jerk off too much.
But seriously, so you've coached a lot of guys from what it seems like. What are some of the common struggles that they come across? One that comes to mind for me is like, sometimes it takes a while to get the wife in the mood. She's not always in the mood, so you're risking rejection in that way. If she is in the mood, you might have to warm her up with a massage and then like be all nice and say sweet nothings to her. And it's like an hour ordeal. Yeah. Or you could just sneak away for like 5 minutes and knock it out and like just get that feeling. So I guess, how does porn addiction affect relationships, and what are some of the common struggles? Say, like, another example would be like if your wife's pregnant or on her period. I can just think of like a ton. How do you help coach guys through something like that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Joel. Let me address the one on pregnancy first, because this is where probably a lot of guys who are listening to this will go like, yo, like, I need sexual release and my wife is not able, to have sex with me. I think it's important, if you have a problem with pornography, to address it as soon as possible, so that you can get to the point where there's some men who are my clients who it's okay for them to masturbate. They do masturbate once in a while. The difference is they don't use pornography. The object of their fantasy is usually their wife. And this is actually a good thing, because it actually increases their attraction to their partner. And finally, this is not something that they do often. It's just something that I tell guys, if you're going to masturbate, make it an event, especially if you don't masturbate a lot. Like, put aside time, that's your quiet time to do that. But do not involve pornography, because that changes. Masturbation is natural, but that changes the entire thing. When it comes to sex and intimacy in committed relationships, one of the most common things is what you mentioned. It is men lose the patience to when it comes to having sex, because you have been conditioned to just, kiss a little, make out a little, and just stick it in there and go for it. And, I have a lot of women who email me. I do not work with women. A lot of women email me, and they've told me that one of the ways that they figure out that a guy is addicted to pornography is that when he's having sex, he wants to change positions every few minutes. And she's like, what are you doing? Why are you flipping me over now? But most guys don't realize this, but that is because when you view pornography, it's unrealistic. The changing of positions, most guys don't realize that, it's actually not a natural thing. It's done so often in pornography because each scene, they are interested in retention and view counts. So the director needs to make sure that there's enough variety to keep guys doing that. But people have watched porn for so much that it's infiltrated our culture, and guys do that. So when you're, making love to your wife, to your partner, you don't have the patience. You've been conditioned to reach orgasm as soon as possible. One of the things I tell guys is something that's been helpful to many of my clients is I tell them, and I just, for the record, I've been in a committed relationship for almost 10 years. One of the things I tell guys is to spend more time on foreplay. You know, first of all, it's going to help you last longer. But guys are like, how much time should I spend on foreplay? I was like, try spending 20 minutes on foreplay. And if you're a guy who watches pornography, it's going to feel like 1 hour. Try spending 20 minutes on that and get her excited for it. And then, you can penetrate and have sex and just see how that works out for you. Another impact that pornography has, apart from the lack of patience, is what's called porn-induced erectile dysfunction, where, and many men experience this, where just sometimes you're not able to get it up for your partner because, well, you've been conditioned to the novelty of multiple partners via pornography. So nobody today, when they watch porn, nobody just watches one scene and gets off to it. You watch it and you're like, well, I'm not going to orgasm to this. So you open up another tab and another tab. And this conditions you to want different partners. But in reality, you're a married man, you have one partner. So when you're there trying to have sex with her, it becomes a lot more challenging because she can't change into a blonde or brunette or whatever you're into at the click of a mouse. So again, staying off pornography will really help with the intimacy in your relationship. Porn-induced erectile dysfunction basically occurs when you are unable to have or maintain an erection because your brain has been rewired and reconditioned to orgasm and be aroused by pornography alone. So when you do it with a real human being, it becomes challenging. And sometimes some men need to watch a little bit of porn before they have sex with their wife because that's how they get excited. And if you find yourself doing that, I want you to know that that is not natural. What is natural is being intimate and excited about your partner, which may sound like an old-fashioned concept today, but I tell guys it is very possible. If you cut out that porn and you cut out the masturbation for a while, then, and your only object of fantasy is your partner, you build a level of sexual intimacy that you cannot get anywhere else. It's exciting. It's not necessarily always new, but it is always something that's fulfilling in a way that it gives you things that pornography can't give you. For instance, when you have sex with your partner, biochemically, you release oxytocin, which is a bonding chemical. You do not release that when you masturbate or when you view pornography. It is only when you are having sex with your partner and you are not imagining scenes from pornography and you did not watch porn to get off before you had sex with him. So I could keep going, but I think that answers your question, right?
Yeah, that's actually pretty crazy. So it only releases oxytocin when you're physically with someone else instead of just watching porn is what you're saying.
Yes. And whenever I say this, guys go like, dude, where are the studies? And one thing I just want to make sure is like, whenever you put this out there, if guys are curious about, dude, well, what he's saying makes sense, but does he have studies to back this up? I'm happy to provide you with a list of different studies that these gentlemen can visit. Just to know that what I'm saying is not just a guy out there who's talking about this, but that everything is based on studies that have been done, and these are just not random anecdotes.
Well, I've been following you for a while, and I know you're not going to bullshit us, so I trust you. I want to respect your time, and I definitely don't want to read through any studies on the weekend either.
Yeah.
I did have one more question for you. Sure. For the guys that are listening that are like, well, I watch porn every night, but I don't have like an addiction. I could quit when I want, the old saying. What are some indicators that somebody might want to maybe not even seek help right away, but at least start taking some proactive steps to cut back or maybe even get help depending on what they need?
Well, I'll just tell you the easy way. A lot of guys start looking for symptoms for porn addiction and trying to figure out if they have a problem. I've actually created a quiz that's on my website. It's elevatedrecovery.org. And there's just like a simple porn quiz with about 12 to 15 questions. If you fill that out, It'll give you an indicator of where you stand in terms of your compulsive behavior. But in your personal life, if you just want to figure it out on your own, it's pretty simple. Can you go for 30 days without pornography? I just tell guys to do that. And most guys never think about it. Also ask yourself, is pornography impacting my relationship? Have I ever, for instance, been late to work or late for a business meeting because I was masturbating? Have I ever looked at my wife's body and gone like, man, why can't she look like this chick? Or why can't she be a little bit more fit? Or why can't her butt look this way? And have you found yourself doing that often? It's quite natural for us as human beings to wish more, for more physically from our partners. But is this something that's recurring? Ask yourself, where am I getting this idea from? Is there something else that's sexually stimulating me that isn't my wife or my partner that's leading to this? Is your ability to perform in bed impacted by pornography? Which means, like, do you need to watch porn, or do you need to imagine a scene from pornography to maintain your arousal with your partner? These are a few things. Do you need to masturbate before you go to bed? Do you masturbate every single day? So on our website, elevatedrecovery.org, we have a bunch of resources that you can use to just figure out if this is an issue for you.
Great. You mentioned your website and the quiz. I'll link those in the show notes. How else can people follow you, support you, and learn more about you?
Well, you found me on YouTube, right, Joel?
Yep.
Yeah, that's the easiest place to find me. You can find me on YouTube. I am an acquired taste because I'm pretty blunt and I say it as it is. So you can find me on YouTube. My podcast is the PornReboot podcast on iTunes. We're on everything. So if you are more of an Instagram guy, we're on there as Elevated Recovery. My website is elevatedrecovery.org. And if you just go to YouTube and search porn addiction or Google porn addiction, will pop up somewhere. And you can see my face, then you'll recognize me. But we have a lot of free resources. And I tell guys, or a lot of guys reach out and they want coaching. I'm like, you may not need coaching. Just use the free resources first. And a lot of the stuff that we provide is enough for you to gain control of your behavior. Yeah.
Great. Well, JK, I can't thank you enough for being on the show, man.
Well, I appreciate it, Joel. Thank you so much.
All right, guys, go check out JK. I'll link the YouTube, the Instagram, everything in the description. And all right, signing off. Have a good weekend, man.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening to the Dads Who Lift podcast. Don't forget to support the show by telling other dads who lift to check us out. You can also go to iTunes and leave a positive review for your chance to win some free Dads Who Lift merch. Until next time, this is Dads Who Lift.